I'm Craig Fisher, and this is Inside Talent. Hello, I'm Craig Fisher, and I am here today with Brandon Sammut, Chief People Officer for Zapier, and Kerry Wang, CEO of Searchlight. Zapier is not just one of our favorite tech tools, they are growing rapidly. And we're going to talk today a little bit of how they're doing that, their sort of method of talent acquisition as a remote organization, and how they've partnered with Searchlight to sort of hire and retain the right people. Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your journey to Zapier?
Of course, Craig and Kerry, great to be with you. So I'm Brandon. I grew up just outside of Detroit, and most of my career has had something to do with building systems to help people realize their potential. I started off in higher education, working with first generation college students to increase on-time graduation rates, then came to an organization called Teach for America. It's really focused on building talent pipelines for K through 12 education in the US. I had my first foray into talent acquisition. So my first love in the people and culture space is right on our topic today. From there, went back to school, did an MBA and a master's in education, really interested in future of work, the role that technology can play, and how we can kind of ride that wave to expand opportunity for as many people as possible. After that, I went into tech, started doing technical business development at a fantastic company called LiveRamp. It's a data connectivity business. But about a year in, I was found out my talent and culture roots showed through, and I was invited to build out LiveRamp's people team. And we did over about 5 years. We grew that company from about 150 to 1,300 people, one country to 13 countries. And then last year, 2021, got a call from Wade Foster, co-founder and CEO at Zapier, at a time when I could not have been farther from looking for another job. But like you, Craig, I did know about Zapier as a product. I think it's really cool. And for someone who loves doing talent and culture work, I really affiliate with Zapier's 100% remote operating model and the opportunity to team up with folks from all over the world. And it's just this boundaryless team formation strategy really stuck out to me from afar. And I started to get pretty excited about the prospect of actually coming onto the team and helping Zapier in its next chapter.
Excellent. I love it. I love seeing my favorite tools and companies succeed and grow. This is fun. Speaking of my favorite tools and companies, Searchlight has been a partner with TalentNet Live for the last year or so, and we are really excited to have Kerry Wang here. Kerry, tell us a little bit about you and Searchlight.
Yes, I'm very happy to be here. Glad to be part of this great discussion. And like Brandon, I'm also a people and talent geek. I studied org behavior while at Stanford in my undergrad. Have been part of my fair share of teams. I've been part of magical teams where it feels like we could run through walls together. And I've also been part of dysfunctional teams where just nothing goes right. And so I'm just passionate about how we can really create engaged and connected teams at scale. And then I studied human-computer interaction, which is all about how do we use technology to augment humans and our connections with one another. My journey at Searchlight started with actually my personal experience as a job candidate, going out on the job search myself. I had accidentally ended up with the same resumes with my twin sister, Anna, CS degrees from Stanford. We worked at companies like Google and McKinsey. And when we went out into the job search, people would just say, even after rigorous interviews, that we were the same person, even though we're not. We have very different working styles, different career aspirations. And so that got us thinking that there's a talent data gap in the way that we're hiring and retaining talent today. And if we filled it, well, it would be win-win for everyone, the candidates to find a place where they belonged, and that it would be great for companies to build the winning teams they need to hit their business goals. Now, one of my core philosophies in building great products is to work hand in hand with the core users and the practitioners. And so I am so grateful that Zapier has been a strategic partner with Searchlight from, I would say, our first year after launch. where we connected. Zapier, being a very data-driven and rigorous company, had done a market search for the right partner for them. And they said that Searchlight was the best in terms of our data capabilities, in particular, really helping them build out their remote workforce. And so ever since then, we've had a tight partnership where Zapier provides great product feedback and we get to build with them.
Well, that sounds like fun to me. I think partnerships like that are what make the world go round. And when you've got, willing partners on both sides to flex and iterate, everyone's opportunity and experience gets better. So that's exciting stuff. Brandon, Zapier has seen remarkable growth over the last 2 years, like 88%, right? And even over the last year, a 37% growth rate. Much of that growth is happening in tech, but also hugely in HR and people. So it sounds like you're building a solid foundation there. Tell us about that strategy.
Of course. Well, that strategy is part of the reason why I was excited to come to Zapier in the first place. I believe that if you want to build an enduring organization and you believe that talent and culture strategy is part of the fuel for that, you ideally want to invest in the people organization or in those people and talent capabilities, at least at pace with your overall team's growth, or ideally slightly ahead of it, right? Because as goes, for example, the talent acquisition engine of the organization or the learning and development organization of that engine, so goes, the rest of the company. And in talking with Wade and the leadership team here at Zapier, just such clear alignment on that approach from our very first conversations. And so you see that reflected in how we're growing here, where absolutely the overall team is growing at exactly the rates that you mentioned, and our people team is growing along with it pretty aggressively to make sure that we don't simply grow, but we grow in a truly healthy way.
Yeah, that it sounds purposeful to me. And I think that's something that we lose a lot in the way we go about hiring. It's copied from what we did 15 years ago and then duct taped and stapled. And it's not nearly as purposeful as it should be lots of times, especially with companies that have grown rapidly. We get what we started with 10, 15 years ago, and maybe we've looked at it once or twice as an organization, but what you're doing sounds way more purposeful than that. So at a growth level such as this, it seems like you need to focus on hiring and retaining the right people, which you are. What are you doing to ensure you're identifying and keeping the right people?
That's a good question, Craig. And this is a truly big challenge and opportunity, right? Companies of all sizes and companies 10, 100 times Zapier's size are also thinking about the same thing. And we can talk later about, from a systems point of view, like how we think about that in terms of our data model or how we use data to inform some of those hiring decisions or, creating mobility opportunities across the company. And it actually starts with transparency, which is actually one of Zapier's 5 values. And here's what I mean by that. If Zapier is in the market, or any organization is in the market and talking about what they're all about and what it's really like to work at the organization, where there's opportunity and where there may not be immediate opportunity to grow in a certain role, all of these details that a lot of candidates and job seekers are interested in learning about. The organization is incredibly transparent and incredibly honest about the answers to those questions. Like that's half of it, at least half of it right there. Even the fastest growing organizations do not need to posture as though they're the best place to work for everybody.
I'm going to agree with that 100%. I think so. It's an overused term, but transparency wins the day in this situation. And doing employer branding right means emphasizing the great things about the organization and acknowledging at least the things that might not be right for everyone and things that we need to work on as well. And so striving for excellence is important, but you have to acknowledge where you are right now at some point along the way in order to attract the right people. And Kerry, it seems like you're doing some of that as well. We just talked about this. You're also rapidly growing, and you said that your talent has come in an inbound manner, and that's something we all strive for. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I feel so grateful and honored that all 3 Searchlighters that even just started yesterday came inbound. And it's a testament to how much that we have tried as well, learning from Zapier, to be transparent about what it's like to work at Searchlight and authentic. And this idea of having authentic employer brands is coming up a lot more. And we're seeing it a lot in the current market, where there's all these stats that say 52% of people that have joined new jobs within the last 6 months to 12 months are seriously looking at new jobs because there hasn't been an authentic way that companies have portrayed themselves. So at Searchlight, there's this idea that we want to help people hire the right thing for their companies, or hire for the right characteristics for their company, hire for the right culture. But it starts with even understanding what that right talent looks like. And it's actually really surprising when I first started, just actually not many companies knowing what that right talent looks like. And we have a way of really looking at talent across 4 things: competencies, soft skills, culture alignment, and career aspirations, as Brandon mentioned. And it's really about finding the match across all 4 of those things and being honest when those aren't a match. And that's what leads you to be able to hire people that can confidently perform and stay.
Again, we're doing it with purpose. I love this. And there are some psychometric tools out there, assessments and things like that companies have used for a while. And I don't think that they do the right things all the time necessarily. And I'm, a fan of each company doing things their own way, but Searchlight, as we've seen, helps in ways that psychometric assessments just can't. And, we're looking at sort of external factors, and we're looking at communication abilities, and we're looking at all kinds of things that make a right fit in an organization that your average psychometric evaluation just doesn't touch. And, along those lines, if you can at the same time remove some bias from your process and encourage diversity, it's a triple win right there. And so, that kind of brings me to a question I have about Zapier's diversity initiative. It's an interesting one. You call it DIBE. Is it an acronym or is it just letters? Tell me about it.
Yeah, good question, Craig. It's an acronym. It stands for diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity. And there's a very specific approach that we've chosen for our DIBE work, our diversity work here at Zapier. And the simplest way to put it is DIBE as DNA. And what we really mean by that is that when you think about like the places where, whether it's for customers or for your own workforce or other stakeholders, like where does diversity, or where does inclusion, where does belonging, like where does equity, like where does that really show up? Like it's infused, right, throughout their experience with the company, right? It's infused in the experience of using the product and how accessible it is. It's infused in the language we use, the examples we share. It is infused in how opportunities are surfaced and decisioned. It shows up every time someone's performance is evaluated. It shows up every time someone's creating an invitation list for an event or a panel. Like these are all the places. So in many ways, like, what we mean by DIBE as DNA is like, we want to basically plumb or design elements of equity and inclusion throughout, almost every conceivable part of how Zapier operates. And so we do have a phenomenal head of DIBE, Maggie Roque, here at Zapier to help orchestrate and coordinate that work. but the actual work itself is meant to be driven, throughout the company by people who wake up every day actually working on those core products, whether it's a, system for, a recruiting system or workflow, a, pay and performance workflow, a product design workflow. So that's how we've been thinking about it.
All right. So I've got an off the cuff question that I think about a lot. What about exit interviews? Does it affect even to that level of when people leave the organization? Have you gotten that purposeful and thoughtful about
it? You bet. Yeah. And we talk about like, how do we, like, what are the learning loops we create through exit interviews? And we also think about all the other sources of perspective and insight we get much earlier in the employee experience. Exit interviews are useful to a degree, but at least for that particular individual, it's already too late at that point. And so, like some other organizations in more recent times, like we've also been encouraging managers to do stay interviews, which is really something I would encourage like every leader to do with their people in good times and in hard times. Because what is a stay interview? It's really just a open, like, kind of predictable frequency conversation about how things are going. It's a chance to sense check whether the manager is still aware of where that person is hoping their role will take them in their career and in their life. And it gives both people an opportunity to talk about points of friction and points of opportunity. And so, like so many things, you hear something like that and you're like, well, that's pretty simple. It really does get back to the notion of doing like common things uncommonly well, and figuring out how to pull out some of that insight in a more structured way, or like how do you actually like structure that data becomes really interesting, so that individual conversations may be happening, and then the question is like, are there themes, right? And so Kerry and the work that we're doing with you all, even the original kind of workflow that we had started working on together with reference checks, like that was so meaningful for us because it took the old way of doing this very common thing where you kind of call around and you hope to catch people when you're already trying to make an offer, and then you're taking notes on a sheet of paper or maybe like somewhere on your computer, but it's never rolled up and the questions can be different every time, right? So we miss the opportunity to pull it all together. And on top of that, the kind of air rate, right, for that old way of doing things is pretty meaningful. So it was really interesting to start a relationship that way, because the value we got out of structuring that particular part of our interview experience was almost immediate.
Well, how very progressive and refreshing to hear that. I love stay interviews. I love rethinking reference checks and how it affects the initial interview process. Kerry, I know that Searchlight is very intentional about how it helps to affect a program like DIBE. Tell us a little more about that and the thought that's been put into it, and sort of what's behind it and how it works.
Yeah, I want to and everything Brandon said about how DIBE, DIBE is just DNA. And actually, for a lot of organizations, their DNA is in their values. And one thing that's really stood out with Zapier, even from the beginning, is how thoughtfully they've hired for their values. And we incorporated that assessment against values into the assessment process that we created using references. I mean, what's a better way of, there is no better way of understanding what someone's like to work with and how they behave around values than through the people who've actually worked with them before. And we realized that it is actually one of the most fair ways as well to assess against values as you hire across different geographies and across different cultures. And so in terms of how we've made a commitment to DEIB, as we call it at Searchlight, it's from the very beginning, we have done regular audits of our algorithms, of our assessments, to ensure they have no adverse impact, so that the matches that we surface and the insights that we surface do not in any way bias against any demographic group.
I love it. All right. Well, there's a lot of things to consider when you are a fully remote company. And Zapier is Zapier. I just did it again. Zapier is one of the original remote employers when that started becoming a thing that people were talking about. And is that difficult on a recruiting team? Are there challenges there? Brandon, you started a recruitment or recruiter incubator for technical recruiters sometime last year. What was behind that, and sort of what are the obstacles that your teams have?
Yeah, good question, Craig. What we were solving for there was in some ways fairly simple, which is that the only role that most tech companies were having a harder time recruiting for than engineers were the people who recruit engineers, right? So technical recruiters. And we were having that challenge too. And so something I had admired about Zapier from afar before I joined is just these like unconventional and especially thoughtful ways of thinking about like how to develop talent, right? So we're talking a little bit directly right now about how to acquire talent. But in this particular case, when the market's so tight and when you're also aiming to grow representation or diversity, when you look at all of that, it's like, we need to do something different than what other organizations are doing if we want a different outcome than what most organizations are getting. And this technical recruiter accelerator program is one example of that, whereby we said, you know what, we do understand there are certain knowledge sets that are required to be a really great technical recruiter that are built on top of the core competencies of just a good recruiter of any type. But we can teach that once people get here. So why don't we open up our funnel to just really amazing recruiters who are aligned with our values, recruiters who are aligned with our commitment to diversifying our workforce, recruiters who understand how to maintain like a bar of excellence, as a company's scaling as it relates to the talent you're bringing in. And then we'll teach folks the rest. Folks can come in as like full-time, full pay on day one. We take accountability for your training and we'll help you make this bridge into your first technical recruiting role. So that was the spirit behind it.
I love that. I love the idea that a good recruiter is a good recruiter. Instincts are instincts. Good background, good training is universal. I run into, my business is process improvement and, recruiting operations excellence. And I run into employers all the time who don't make that investment. They need to hire some recruiters quickly, so they hire people that are inexperienced in recruiting. And that's hard to teach. It's much easier to teach technical terms than it is to teach recruiting in general, right? And so they end up with teams that are trying to learn both things at the same time, and it's an uphill battle. So I love the incubator idea. I love the thought that bring in solid people and teach them the tech terms. That's brilliant. So Kerry, one of the things that I've been wondering about is, there are great tools for technology out there, for talent out there, and how do teams operationalize that sort of tech? I mean, very often I'm asked to look at a company's tech stack and make suggestions. You need this or you need that, pull that lever, do this, don't do that. But the tools don't get used, right? You're paying, $500,000 for a CRM that nobody uses properly. And it's ubiquitous. I mean, every company has a situation like that. For applicant tracking system or other tech that, it's vacant half the time. So how do we avoid that, and how can talent teams operationalize technology better?
That's a wonderful question, and it's something that I believe we answer hand in hand with our users and our customers. And how to operationalize Searchlight at Zapier is something that I actively talk to Brandon about, and I have monthly conversations with his awesome talent insights team to make sure that we are working within their existing workflows. So one of our core principles is, how do we actually meet our users already where they work and not try to make them go to a separate system. So from the very beginning, we invested in our integrations, and Searchlight integrates with almost every single ATS and HRIS system out there. And you can imagine that it's almost like a product on its own, maintaining these integrations, but it's worth it because it means that it's much easier to operationalize the technology and the insights that we're building for these teams. And I would just say that it is so awesome and to be able to build for talent teams in particular, because companies, if you think about it, are just a group of people that are aligned towards a common mission. And recruiters, talent teams, people teams are on the front lines of being able to bring in those people that make up that company. They're literally building the company of people that are driving all these great results in the world. And so to be able to empower them to not only hire faster, but to hire smarter, to be able to improve their quality of hire, that's something that makes me passionate and drives me to keep going.
So that signals to me a bright future for people first organizations everywhere, and especially customers of Searchlight. And, we should, not be remiss and let everyone know that you can find Searchlight at searchlight.ai. I'm a big fan. Brandon, what does the future hold for Zapier?
Well, we're going to take another couple big steps towards our mission, which is to make automation work for everyone. And this is just such an important problem that Zapier is working on, right? Which is to bring the power of automation from both a kind of affordability and ease of use perspective to people and organizations that typically, for whom that type of technology would be out of reach. Right? Like the automation that Zapier makes possible is aimed at helping people be more human, right? Taking away the most tedious parts of the work we do so that we can spend more time doing the things that humans do best. Like, what an amazing mission to get to work on every day. And so Zapier had its 10th birthday last fall, have over 500,000, accounts and millions of people who use Zapier, every month. And when you look at the kind of overall demand for what Zapier is doing, it's just so much bigger. And that gets us really excited about what's possible. And so, we talked at the top of our conversation today about the investment that Zapier is making in people. Well, all of that is in service of making big investments in our product for our customers. So at the end of the day, it's all about our mission. It's all about our customers, and our people are what's making it possible.
Well, as a day one customer, I just want to say thank you. And we, your customers, appreciate you. Thank you, Kerry, and thank you, Brandon. This has been enlightening for me, and I think it will be for the talent acquisition audience of Inside Talent. Join us again next time. Thank you, everyone.